And we did find out. Let's bring in our panel to talk about it. Real Clear Politics co-founder and president Tom Bevan. John McCarthy, former senior advisor for political engagement for President Joe Biden. And Mary Catherine Ham, Fox News contributor. So there have been some strikes that we understand are mostly along the Strait of Hormuz, but Iranian assets there. Vice President J.D. Vance putting this out on Twitter not long ago. Iran signed a ceasefire agreement. We have honored it. If they have disagreements about how the MOU is being applied, they can pick up the phone, but violence will be met with violence. I mean, Tom, does this end in any kind of lasting, reliable agreement?
Well, anybody who thought that the Iranians were going to be good to their word, I think, or maybe that was wishful thinking. And so we find ourselves in a situation where we're now, trying to keep this ceasefire together, but we're in a tit for tat, and I don't know how how this is going to work out. We seem stuck in this cycle, and the administration is trying to create this space where they can have these negotiations and try and move the ball down the field. But so far, they seem to be struggling.
Well, and MK, now Iran says, OK, we're going to respond. Where are the off-ramps?
Right. I don't think it's so far so good, and it hasn't been so far so good since the first agreement to a ceasefire, during which the ceasefire was not honored on their side, nor was the Strait of Hormuz opened, which is why we're asking again for those things to happen. I do appreciate hearing from the J.D. Vance that violence will be met with violence. I think striking is important because I firmly believe you cannot gentle parent the Middle East, much less specifically Iran. And Trump wants his threat credibility maintained. I do think that's important to him, and it's important to the world order that people believe that he will come after them if they violate these things.
And listen, this has been intractable for presidents of both parties for decades. I mean, they've been yelling death to America and death to Israel on the regular. With that in mind, Iran has been saying part of their issue why they aren't calming down is because Israel is still hitting Lebanon. Israel says Hezbollah is hitting us. That's what we're doing there. Well, Axios reports today that there's been a signing of this Israel-Lebanon framework. It says the framework is designed to eventually end Israel's occupation of southern Lebanon. A senior Hezbollah-affiliated lawmaker condemned the agreement and said Lebanese authorities would need to fight a civil war if they wanted to enforce it, which, John, gets to the problem. A lot of these primary negotiators may have other factions within their countries, within their organizations that are not on board with the overall deal.
Yeah. I mean, one of the tricky things about, working in a White House, serving in an administration, and certainly being president or vice president, is that these jobs in so many ways are reactive. The president keeps trying to find an off-ramp here, and you could understand why he's frustrated. Because politically, this is a loser for him. You saw when he spoke today about it at the Faith and Freedom Coalition. I mean, that's a key base for him. And I mean, he really tried to get off it as quickly as he could. He started going back to the issues of lawlessness at the border and Democrats wanting to, change bathrooms and things like that, because that's a political red meat issue for his base. He needs to get his numbers up. He's getting a lot of pressure from members in the House. So, he's trying to find an off-ramp, not just for good foreign policy, but for political survival.
Yeah, I mean, slightly less volatile than the Middle East. Washington,
yes.
We've got plenty going on here. I want to play a little back and forth between Senator Slotkin and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. This idea that there's a fight for the soul of the Democrat Party and which wing is going to be calling the shots.
There is every single day a debate going on in the Democratic Party. And for me, this is why I'm a big believer in just new leadership, significant change. The old models do not work for people.
I have no idea what Alyssa Slotkin was talking about there. Of course, any Democratic leader is going to continue to stand with their colleagues.
Well, she says the old models do not work. MK, does that mean socialism is now the framework for what works, at least in some of these races?
Yeah, look, I think they're in for a real fight. And look, I think they have a point about new leadership when you look at somebody like Chuck Schumer. The problem is that they having to find young Democrats who are not very extreme progressive lefties is very hard, which is why when you see this new crop coming up, there are people who can work in blue districts in really sort of one-party rule areas. But once that becomes the picture of the party and that is broadcast to the rest of America in purple states, they're going to be like, I'm not so sure about these people who can't answer the question, should we put murderers in jail? Right? That's not something that appeals to middle-of-the-road voters. And I think that's something Rahm Emanuel is flagging and going, how are we going to deal with this? But Pelosi was sort of put down, controlled by the squad in 2019 and wasn't able to get that anti-Semitism censure through or resolution through. And so I'm not sure that Hakeem Jeffries is going to do any better.
Well, and now we have to look and see. Listen, some of these people are coming to be part of his caucus now. They've won their primaries. It's likely they're going to be the winners in their general election races. John, how does he manage that? Because if he becomes Speaker, if Democrats flip the House, he's now got to manage a very left progressive wing of his party that may not want to vote with him on any mainstream issues.
You know, let's not put the cart before the horse, right? We need to win. And I will say, defund the police, abolish ICE. These are not winning political messages here. So the Democratic Party needs to find a way to distance itself from this. The important thing here is really keep your eye on the prize and look at the races that people are actually needing to flip. The organizations that support candidates like this, Justice Democrats, have never actually flipped a seat. They just make blue places bluer. You actually need to look at the places where we're actually going to be majority makers, and they're running far away from these types of ideas. When Democrats take back the House, knock on wood, come November, I think that this will be a small but volatile part of the caucus. It'll be tough to manage, but, they're not majority makers.
I saw a little wince from MK when you said when they be taking the
Knock
ball.
on wood, I'm an optimist.
Well, we've got a pollster with us. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this Colorado race that's coming up this week, because that may be a bit more of an indication of where the party's going, trying to, from the left, unseat a current Democrat, Diana DeGette, out there in Colorado.
Yeah, look, overall, I think the communists, right, and these folks they're not just DSA, they're not democratic socialists, they're socialists, they're Marxists, in some cases they're communists. They don't sort of have their nose under the tent. They are inside the tent. And there is a civil war. Lissa Slotkin is actually right. There is a civil war that's going on in the Democratic Party right now. And we're seeing it play out in all of these primary races. We're going to see it play out in a bunch of other states, including Colorado, coming up. But the progressive wing, the Democratic Socialist wing, whatever you want to call them, the Marxist wing of the party, they have all the energy, they have all the juice, they have all the sway. And the question is, how does that play nationally come November if they do become sort of the face of the Democratic Party?
Good foil for Republicans, but it opens up all kinds of other campaign issues. All right, John, winners and losers, we'll kick off with you.
Yeah, so I would say, of course, the winner of the week is actually the New Dem coalition in the Congress. It's the moderate flank of the party. They've got 3 out of 3 wins this week. They're actually going to be the ones who make the majority. Losers, I will say, the ballroom. We talked about it every single day of the week, it seems, and now we've moved on to the reflecting pool. So, feel bad for that. But, Donald Trump's interiors are going to be a thing for the next few months.
Okay, Mary Catherine?
My winner is air conditioning and all of those who get to enjoy it. There is a global debate blazing in the heat wave in Europe about whether it's ethically correct to use AC. But in this country, we are united. 88 to 93% of households have it. This modern miracle is great. It makes us prosperous. It makes us comfortable. The loser, I would say, people who want affordable housing in New York City, because a rent freeze is going to make quality go down. It's going to make supply go down. People are not going to invest in new housing. And eventually that's going to just mean higher prices instead of lower.
Well, and back to your winner, it is fun to watch the Europeans who are here for the World Cup just lavish praise on our AC units and very excited. Yes, please soak it up while you're here. All right, Tom, winners.
Winners Mamdani. He had a great week. 3 out of 3, including 2 sitting congressmen. And one of the races, the Goldman race, was a 30-point blowout. It wasn't even close. So for anybody who's looking at who has the muscles to flex within the party right now, it's Zohran Mamdani. Loser is the WNBA. Caitlin Clark got roughed up again, and for the life of me, I cannot understand. I've never seen anything like this where a league, including the management, the referees, including a lot of the players, seem intent on harming and killing off their best player, the person who's responsible for so much of that league's success.
It's grabbing a lot of headlines and getting a lot of attention for the WNBA. Okay, panel, thank you very much. Up next.
All right, thanks for watching. Check out my new podcast, Hanging Out with Me, Sean Hannity. The big interviews, the debates you won't get anywhere else. Like and subscribe for new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday.